If you're a professional brewer, you know how frustrating it can be when you go to place a yeast order and what you're looking for is out of stock. Well, Imperial Yeast is here to help by guaranteeing that commercial orders up to 20 liters of 10, yes, 10 of their most popular strains will ship free if they're not in stock when you place your order. Some of these strains include A38 Juice for those hazy IPAs, A07 Flagship, a classic in clean American styles, L13 Global, which is said to be one of the world's most popular lager strains, A44 Viking for your warm fermented beers, and so many more. So in addition to pitching right with the highest quality yeast on the market, they're promising that yeast will be ready when you need it or shipping is on them. Whether you're a pro or a home brewer, if you haven't tried Imperial Yeast in your brewery, it's time to up your game. You can check out everything Imperial Yeast has to offer and place your commercial orders at imperialyeast.com. Based on numerous conversations I've had with others, one of the big motivators, it seems, for many to start homebrewing is Hoppy IPA. How cool to be able to take one of your favorite styles and craft unique versions of it all on your own at home. However, likely to keep things interesting, most end up branching out into other styles, and one that is similar in many ways to IPA, yet possesses its own set of tasty characteristics, is American Strong Ale.
Yeah, American Strong Ale is quite an interesting style that kind of toes the line between some other styles such as double IPA or even barley wine. And I've had some experience drinking and making American Strong Ales, so this is a really excellent episode to join you.
Yeah, well, I try to be as upfront as possible when I'm talking about my personal experiences. So keeping with that goal of mine, I just want to say that of the hundreds of batches of beer that I've made over the years, not one of them has ever been an American Strong Ale, at least intentionally. I've definitely made batches of double IPA and red IPA that ended up being higher in strength than I intended, but I've never purposely set out to make an American Strong Ale. That said, I have certainly consumed my fair share of this potent style, both commercially brewed and homebrewed versions, and I'm looking forward to chatting about it with you today, Steve. All right, if you like what we're up to and you want us to keep doing it, please consider becoming a patron of Brewlosophy. By committing to a small monthly pledge over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world. This month's guest is owner of Omega Yeast, Lance Shaner, whose story of how he got into wrangling yeast is quite fascinating. I'm sure he's going to discuss that during the session. Over a decade old at this point, Omega Yeast is known for producing some really innovative strains such as Cosmic Punch and Heliogazer, which are their thiolized strains, as well as a line of more standard ale and lager yeasts. When you're a firm nerd like us or just like to learn new things, then these are the types of sessions that you're going to really dig. To be a part of it, you have to make your pledge of just $3 or more at patreon.com/Brewlosophy no later than Friday, May 19th, 2023, as Lance is going to be taking questions that Saturday, the 20th. All past sessions are available on our private Patreon and Facebook pages, so you can go back and watch them whenever you like. Learn more about becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy. Another really easy way to help us out is by using the links found at brewlosophy.com/support when you're shopping online. Your experience doesn't change at all, and we get a little kickback for the referral. A few people have reached out to ask us what affiliate links we have, so rather than repeating the web address, I'll just tell you our main accounts are with More Beer, Great Fermentations, Brewers Hardware, The Brew Bag, ThermoWorks, and that gigantic online retailer who happens to be named after the Amazon River. All of those links can be bookmarked so that future purchases continue to help us out without you even noticing. Thanks so much to everybody who's already been using those links. It really is a huge help. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who are known for their incredible all-in-one electric brewing systems. I've had the opportunity on both to use both the 120 and 240 volt systems, and I'm telling you, these things are legit. Efficient, easy to use, with a relatively small footprint. You will not be disappointed with one of these units. Plus, the dudes behind the company run a killer YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for Clawhammer Supply. If you're in the market for electric brewing gear, make sure to check out what Clawhammer Supply has to offer at clawhammersupply.com, and don't forget to let them know Brewlosophy sent you when you're checking out. That's clawhammersupply.com. Listener Will from New Jersey had some feedback regarding the way in which he heard us pronounce a certain off flavor. Will said, okay, so here's the situation. My parents went away on a week's vacation. Oh, wait, that's not right. Damn you, Fresh Prince. Anyhow, what I wanted to ask was why everyone pronounces, all right, here we go, diacetyl as diacetyl. I'm not saying they're wrong, but when I first started brewing, I had no idea how to say it. So I looked it up. According to the dictionary and Wikipedia, it's actually pronounced diacetyl. This is a dilly of a pickle. I wish I were arrogant enough to call people wrong for pronouncing it diacetyl, but who wants to be that guy? Well, we all do, but since I'm fairly newish to the brewing world, I would never do that. I'm just curious as to how the majority of people I talk to pronounce it diacetyl, yourselves included, not a dig. And yet it's clearly spelled out phonetically if you look it up. What are your thoughts as to how this came to be? I know it sounds like a nitpick, English doctorate here, which is just a fancy way of saying toilet paper, but that's why I need some clarity. What do you think, Steve?
Well, with all the talk about the diacetyl rest that is so important with these lagers that we love, there is one member of my homebrew club that will always say diacetyl, and I've picked up on it, and I've actually jokingly said diacetyl as sort of a mocking way of the way he says it. But now that I realize this and I hear this feedback, which is awesome, and I too have an English degree, I kind of have to stop jokingly saying it and just be confident with it, because I guess that's the way it goes.
You're jokingly correcting yourself there, Steve.
Yes, exactly.
Right way. This is pretty funny. Look, I have zero clue why it came to be pronounced the way that it does here in America. But one thing I know about us, at least in America, again, this is my culture. This is what I know, is that we absolutely take words and then say them the way we want to say them. I mean, there are still people, I've heard it probably 5 times this week alone, who say supposedly with a B, not a D. I mean, people do that. Mm-hmm. And there's like this weird push lately I've learned. It's like, just if you know what they mean, that's all that matters. I'm not into that level of modernism quite yet. But Again, I have zero clue why it came to be pronounced diacetyl instead of diacetyl. Probably about 10 years ago or so, I heard somebody who's been around a while, I forget exactly who it was, but they pronounced it diacetyl, and I forced myself to start saying it that way. But that only lasted a few months before the muscle memory of saying diacetyl kicked in, and I just went back to saying it that way. Now, I'm not convinced the phonetic pronunciation of diacetyl, or a lot of words for that matter, provided by various dictionaries, are necessarily set in stone. Sometimes there is more than one correct way to say the same word. For example, I say Caribbean, others say Caribbean. It seems likely that this tomato type of thing, but maybe I'm wrong. So if so, let us know. I know that a lot of people who are from across the pond, as it were, do say diacetyl. Pretty much everybody that I've met, who's English, I believe that's how they've said it. And we just say diacetyl over here. I have no idea why it is that way, but it seems to have become kind of an accepted norm. So I'm fine with that. But thank you so much for the feedback, Will. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brewlosophy.com or leave us a note on social media. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@thebrewlosophy show. Host Martin Keene has been doing a truly incredible job, which is evidenced by the fact we've already got nearly 15,000 subscribers in barely 2 months' time. Shocking to me. It's so rad. And we would love for you to be a subscriber as well. When we return from this break, the focus will be on American Strong Ale. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brewlosophy sent you. Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD, that's BRUPOD, at AtlanticBrewSupply.com. I can't speak for anybody but myself, but I have a feeling I'm not the only one who, when considering American beer styles in general, immediately thinks of relatively high strength, bitter, and pungent hops. I don't know what it is, but there seems to be something about this country that prefers in-your-face over subtlety, and it shows in our brewing. Anyway, one of the handful of styles that certainly fits this bill is American Strong Ale, which has an interesting, albeit fairly brief history.
Yeah, it's really an interesting beer style. I kind of equate it to a beer that you definitely sip. You're not going to be chugging these, and you're not going to be shotgunning them out of a can. Sorry.
Well, speak for yourself there, Steve. I'll never forget. Yeah. I'll never forget. Well, I gotta say this because you saying that actually reminded me of this experience. I believe we did a brews views on like homebrew clubs and all of that, and where I was talking about a club that I was a part of that kind of turned more into a drinking club than it did a homebrew club. And there was this dude every month would show up with a classic American Strong Ale who we'll leave nameless because I'm sure it'll come up later in his jacket pocket, and he would just chug this thing as soon as he showed up. It was like gulp, 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 and that was the way he would start every club meeting. So there are those out there who chug these beers, Steve. Okay. I'm just saying. I'm not going to. You're right about that.
Right. Hey, you do you, and you enjoy that, and I will be sitting by the fire enjoying my sipper.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. So American Strong Ales, like you said, they don't really have a long history. They're a style that kind of stemmed out of, I think, the love of hoppy, high strength beers over here, in the States, and people who are like most things, people who are experimenting. My understanding is that the modern American Strong Ale, or what we refer to as American Strong Ale these days, can basically be traced back to like early craft beers just making imperial versions of American amber or red ales, and that's basically what it is. It's kind of like an imperial red IPA. I think is probably one way to best describe what a modern American Strong Ale is. Does that work for you in your experience, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely kind of toes the line between like you said, the double IPA, American barley wine, anything that's, really hoppy and also very malty to kind of, create that balance that brewers want to achieve, and of course make it drinkable. And yeah, my experiences have been, although very somewhat tame. I'm not, bringing them to club meetings or anything like that and shotgunning them. But it's just it's a nice style to make. I think maybe during holidays, give them as gifts, and just really enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Yeah, and the nice thing is, and we're going to talk about, brewing this style, kind of traditional approaches. It's not very difficult, but like you said, it's a stronger beer. It's more malt forward. That's balanced by a pretty assertive hop character and bitterness. The BJCP describes it as a malty, bitter, and strong American ale fitting in the space between American barley wine, double IPA, and red IPA. The malty and hoppy flavors can be quite strong, but are generally in balance. I think that's kind of where what you and I are talking about. It's this interesting style that could kind of fit in other styles, but it became its own thing because it's not quite there. It's not as strong as an American barley wine. It's not as hoppy and pale as a double IPA. It's not quite, as red IPA-ish as a red IPA. It's also a little bit stronger. So it kind of fills that tiny little, void, I guess, if there was one there, stylistically speaking. And it really has kind of become its own thing.
It's sort of like the double IPA American barley wine's little brother, that you don't want to, disclude him. You want to invite him to the park and play ball, and you want him to have a good time. So you bring him out every once in a while. And I'm thinking the American strong ales are good as a style in which you want to kind of clean out the freezer with all your hops, as long as they're blending well together, melding well together. Yeah. You can definitely clean out the freezer in that regard, and make a decent beer.
Maybe that's how this style really came to be. Is somebody had a little, they're like, I've only got 2 more pounds of malt. I've got these extra hops in the fridge. I'm just going to do this kitchen sink beer, and it ended up being really good. And
right.
Voila, you've got American Strong Ale.
Right.
Let's get into the BJCP style description a little bit. First off, you got appearance. This beer is going to be about medium amber to deep copper in color, or light brown. Good clarity, medium low to medium off-white to light tan head that can have low retention. That's a pretty common thing for higher strength beers if that foam doesn't necessarily stick around. And given its strength, it may have legs, meaning that if you kind of swirl it in the glass, it's going to have those little alcohol bits that drop down in the glass. Aromatically speaking, what are we looking for?
Medium to high aroma of American or New World hops, often being citrus, floral, pine, tropical fruit varieties. Moderate to bold malt aroma with medium to dark caramel is common. Toasty or bready possible. With a light roast or chocolate is allowable. I think that's more you're dealing with the color, which we'll get into a little bit later. But definitely can come into the aroma. Neutral to moderately fruity fermentation profile. And the alcohol is definitely going to be notable here, although it's not going to be something that's going to be off-putting.
Yeah, I think that's key, is that anytime you're making a high-strength beer, you want that alcohol to be there, obviously. It's in the name, strong ale, but you don't want it to be the feature. You don't want it to be solventy or hot. And there are ways around that when you get to the fermentation approach. In terms of flavor, it basically follows the aroma. We're looking for malt forward with caramel, toffee, or dark fruit qualities. It can also have toasty, bready, and kind of a rich malt supportive flavor, including light chocolate or roast, without being burnt or sharp. That's another key. You want no solventy alcohol, and you don't want roasty. We're not looking for an imperial stout here. You really want the other malt characters to be what shines, but that little bit of chocolate or roasted malt can add just some depth in an American strong ale. The perception of sweetness from the malt is appropriate. You can have a little bit of sweetness, but it should not be cloying, and it should be balanced by the bitterness. So the more sweet that beer gets, you're likely, the more hops you're going to use to balance it with the bitterness. You should have moderate to high hop flavor. That's in line with the aroma. So that nice, citrus, floral, pine, tropical fruit thing. Medium to high bitterness to balance the malt sweetness. Low to moderate esters. Again, that's going to be something that comes from your fermentation, and depending on the yeast that you use, you may have more or less. Not necessary in this beer, but also not necessarily an off thing. It can have alcohol flavor as long as it's not sharp or burns your mouth when you swallow. And they say that low diacetyl is optional. Low diacetyl is optional.
There you go.
Yeah, that's right. But I guess they optional, maybe allowable. They use that word a lot in the BJCP as well. I personally would try to avoid it at all costs, because why have it in there? But I suppose if you're using a specific type of yeast, maybe a certain English strain that does produce very low amounts, maybe that can kind of help to contribute to the fullness of the flavor of that beer. But that's the flavor. In terms of mouthfeel, Steve?
In terms of mouthfeel, medium to full body. The alcohol is warm, is appropriate, and should not be hot. Light hop astringency is appropriate, and medium low to medium carbonation, which is always important.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have experienced the same thing I have. I mean, I know they have, because I get emails about it all the time, that when you're making the higher strength beers, for some reason, getting a good carbonation on it, forced carbonation wise at least, can be kind of difficult. It takes a little bit longer. It's harder to kind of to guess, where to stop. But yeah, it is very important. This is a beer. You got to have carbonation in it. But you don't want it to be too high, especially, too high or too low. You're not going to enjoy that as much. So, and I think it's interesting that they point out the light hop astringency is appropriate. I think that's just because you have to use a lot of hops to balance that malt sweetness. And so if you get a little bit of that astringency, that puckering in the back of your jaw, that's not a bad thing necessarily. It's almost expected. But I was thinking about this, using some of these modern hop products like Lupa Max, maybe you kind of avoid that astringency piece altogether.
Oh.
Kind of a neat idea. Yeah.
It is a good idea.
I mean, you use 30% less hops, 30% less vegetal matter, that's 30% less chance in my head of getting astringency. So,
right.
In terms of the vital statistics for this style of beer, you're looking at 1062 all the way up to 1090 OG. I mean, that's a hefty beer there. And it can attenuate down to 1014 to 1024 for a ABV range of between 6.3. I mean, that's like IPA territory, all the way up to 10%, which pushes you into that close to barley wine territory. So there's a lot of variation in the strength of this American strong ale. IBU can range anywhere from 50 to 100. And then your SRM, you're looking for 7 to 18. That is 18 is not that dark. It's certainly in that red range, but 7 is pretty pale. So again, you can see here that American Strong Ale does kind of straddle that line between double IPA and, double red IPA, I suppose. It's kind of in that weird space.
And I'm going to preface this by saying I don't mean to discount this style by any means, but it almost seems like it's kind of a catch-all, and I don't say that in a derogatory way. It just seems like there's a lot of freedom where you can, you go from 6.3 to 10% ABV, 50 to 100 IBU, 7 to 18 SRM. It's a lot of, there's a huge range in all of that, which is just, it really does allow you to kind of play around with, and going back to that kind of that kitchen sink type of beer, let's empty out the freezer, let's empty out the grain bin, and let's have some fun.
Yeah, I agree. It does feel like that, and I'm sure that there were like professional brewers who actually had some intention of making American Strong Ale, but I'm also wouldn't doubt if they were just like, dude, we got some leftover grain, we got some leftover hops, let's just try this out, and it ended up being a good, good fit. So, in terms of the ingredients that one would use to craft an American Strong Ale, it's really not that complicated. We've already kind of hit on it. You're gonna use a basic pale base malt, likely from North America. This is an American Strong Ale, but anything you have on hand that is a pale malt, a pale ale malt, even a Pilsner malt, if you really wanted to, I'm sure would be fine. And you're going to balance that with some medium to dark crystal malts. Maybe use a little bit of some chocolate or pale chocolate just for character and color, but you don't want to overdo it because you don't want to get that roasty thing. The BJCP doesn't list any adjuncts, maybe some dark sugars though, just to increase the strength without impacting the body too much. I could see that being acceptable. And honestly, it's an American style of beer. If you want to, you can kind of throw at it what you want. That's sort of what we're known for. Hops, you mentioned this earlier, Steve, that the hops that one might use are going to be either American or New World varieties. Basically what you're looking for is that fruity, piney characteristic that modern hops are known for. You're not going for spicy, earthy, floral necessarily, but more of that line of fruity and piney. Does that sound accurate?
It does. You kind of use your classic C hops, Centennial, Cascade, Chinook, Citra, maybe a little Simcoe for bittering. You want to go New World, and even go to New Zealand and Australian hops. There's a plethora of hops out there. I was even thinking when prepping for this show, was thinking about the new emergence of South African hops and kind of pair that with the New Zealand or the Australian hops, which to me seem to be rather tame at times. So you want to really pack a punch. And it's just something different that you can use. Kind of go back to the adjuncts. I was thinking that maybe this could be a good style to add some oak to, and age it a little bit on some, if you have a barrel or if you have the oak spirals. Definitely that could add some interesting characteristics. But other than that, I would kind of stay away from adjuncts with this style. Yeah,
in talking about the oak, again, that's just sort of this indicator that a lot of people, would age their barley wine. And this style, American Strong Ale, isn't quite as strong as a barley wine. It's a little bit less malty because of the hop profile. Barley wine is known for having a decent amount of hops, but American Strong Ale has more. So I could see it working really well with a lot of the treatment that you might do to a barley wine. And that's kind of one of the neat things about American Strong Ale. What would you ferment this with? So you brew this up, you make your wort, it's all sitting there. What are you going to pitch into it?
Probably, if I'm looking at Imperial's list of hop or of yeast, I would probably maybe thinking Flagship, which is a good Chico strain. maybe joystick or citrus or even dry hop, all seem to be kind of, they would definitely do the job. Clean, does throw out a little bit of flavor. So I think it would definitely help.
Yeah, the thing about American Strong Ale, I mean, you're throwing a lot of modern, American and New World hops at it. So if you use a yeast that is known to produce, some fruity esters, that's perfectly appropriate. It can actually help to accentuate the hop character, which is something that a lot of us focus on. I'm with you. I'd probably go for Flagship, AO7 Flagship, which is the same same source basically as like 1056 or 001 California Ale. But I would not be opposed to using something like AO1 House, which is the Whitbread strain, or even AO9 Pub. Just mash it way low and throw something like Pub at it, which I love in American IPA. I think that would work incredibly well. You can kind of do what you want with American Strong Ale, and it'll still kind of fit within that category. So there's a lot of room to play in terms of the yeast that you would use for this to ferment this type of beer. Now, brew. This is I feel like I say this every time we talk about an American style of beer or a beer that was sort of birthed in the American tradition over here. They are not difficult to brew. I mean, you do basically the same thing with an American Strong Ale that you would do with an American IPA that you would do with an American Blonde Ale. But there are certain things people like to pay attention to, right? And certain aspects of the brewing process that a lot of people look at as being absolutely necessary. So for water chemistry, you can do what you want. If it were me, I would probably go with a balanced mineral profile, so like a 1-to-1 sulfate to chloride ratio. A lot of people on any malty style are going to kind of lean into that chloride just to accentuate that warm malt character. If you're using a bunch of crystal malt or something, and you're concerned about the pH of your mash, you may need to do some acidification. Though, if you're using even a little bit of darker malts, even if it's just for color, that may be just enough to get you down to that 5.2 to 5.6 pH range. Mash, you're looking at 60 minutes, a typical 60 to 90 minute mash, somewhere around like 150 to 154, 66 to 68 C. You really want to get, you're throwing a lot of malts at this, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, Steve, when you're making bigger beers. You really want to get that beta amylase doing its thing. You want to get more fermentable sugars to encourage dryness, given that the high amount of malt that you're using. What the last thing you want is to end up with a beer that is, syrupy or cloying. Now, I'm not here saying that mash temperature will ultimately result in like a perceptibly sweet or dry beer. We've not been able to prove that, over the years of doing this, but that is the common belief. And so I think that the mash temperature that most are settling on is somewhere between that 150 to 154, 66 to 68 C.
Yeah, I mean, it has become like the target temperature for almost every one of my styles that I brew, unless it's something that I really am aware of that I really want to dial it down a little bit. Just did an American light lager at like 148, I think, a couple weeks ago. Or if I'm doing like a saison, I'm pulling back a little bit. But yeah, 150 to 154 F is always going to be kind of the range for me.
Yeah, exactly. And I read somewhere recently, actually, recently, like years ago, but that 154 Fahrenheit, which is 68 C, is the sweet spot for beta and alpha amylase. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. And I've seen a lot of recipes that are smack on, just do 154, right? But what I've been hearing from people lately, and I don't know if it's a function of just our kind of understanding of how mash temperature perceptibly impacts beer, is that people are relying on mash temperature nowadays a lot more for controlling alcohol content more than they are to sweetness and dryness. So kind of an interesting thought. But I think the traditional way of viewing it is that you for American Strong Ale, you don't want this thing to be cloying or too syrupy in your mouth, because it is going to have a lot more malt that you're using to get that higher strength. How long would you boil an American Strong Ale wort?
Probably 60 minutes. I don't see any reason to go more than that. You can achieve the adequate isomerization of the alpha acids and reduce the risk of DMS with 60 minutes.
Yep. 60 to 90 minutes. I mean, I think that's the common approach here. You're also looking to condense the wort. One of the things that when you're making a high wort or a high strength beer, one of the levers that you have is, all right, where are we at pre-boil? If it's a little bit lower than I was expecting, then you just boil it a little bit longer, adjust your hop additions. It's kind of a nice lever to have. You can't really do that if you're trying to go for a lower strength beer and it ends up being too high. You have to add water.
Right.
In this case, you can just boil add a half hour to your boil and then move all of your hop additions up 30 minutes or whatever, and you can kind of fix that issue pretty quickly. So
exactly.
You want to quickly chill this wort because a quick chill ensures a good cold break, and then you want to rack as little trub to the fermenter as possible. That's just classic understanding of what's good for brewing. Fermentation, you're looking for standard ale fermentation temp. One of the things that I think whenever you're making a strong beer like this that is high strength, high OG to start, and you don't want to get those fusel hot alcohols or too much ester development, rather than going at that 68 Fahrenheit or 20 C, which is that standard ale temp, maybe knock the temp down 4 or 5 degrees. I've seen people ferment, American strong ale all the way up to imperial stout at like 64, 65 with a regular ale strain, in part because of the exothermic properties of fermentation. It's going to create its own heat. And the higher strength that beer, ostensibly, the more strength or the more heat it's going to create during the fermentation process. So, I think 65, 66 Fahrenheit is probably a pretty safe bet. When fermentation is complete, how are you treating this beer?
So it should be clear, which can be achieved through mechanical or chemical filtration. However, given its strength, American Strong Ale is often aged for enough time for it to clear up on its own.
Yeah, this is one of those things that's interesting. You hear hoppy, and then you're like, well, you don't want age, you want the hop character. American Strong Ale is a strong beer before it is a hoppy beer, in my opinion, at least. And some of the best versions I've had haven't been, 2 weeks on, later after they were brewed. They've been, 6 weeks or so sitting around, given time to clear up. Again, this is an American style, a kind of a classic American style ale that is expected to be clear. It's expected to have decent carbonation, medium to low to medium carbonation. That's like 2.0 to 2.4 volumes. And so you're going to do what you need to do to get it there. If you're bottle conditioning, you need to use a calculator to determine how to get to that point. You also got to be careful to make sure that any residual sugars, are fermented, that it is fully fermented. I have heard from more people about bottle bombs. I've never had a bottle bomb, knock on wood. I've heard from more people who have bottle bombs, and they're like, why does this keep happening? And what style are you making? It is almost always high OG styles, big, strong styles like this. So be careful with that. Just be cognizant. Let the beer ferment out until it's done,
Yeah. Even with us in kegging now, or for me kegging, I've noticed that, patience is key. And the beers that might look a little hazy in the beginning, like a simple blonde ale, will come out crystal clear at the end when I'm kicking the keg, and I'm like, oh, this is what the beer should have looked like in the very beginning. So, patience is
wishful thinking
good.
there, yeah.
Yes, definitely, for sure.
Well, and like you said, you can use mechanical filtration. You could push this thing through a filter. I don't think that's going to, at least the data that we have indicates that that's not going to reduce, and the flavor of the beer or anything. That's just a myth.
Right.
And you can use chemical filtration. That's gelatin, biofine, clarity firm, stuff like that. You want this thing to be as clear as possible. This is not a high strength hazy beer, And by the way, hazy red colored beers do not look very pretty. That's just my opinion.
No.
So you want to be able to look through this through the glass, see your fingers through it. Have it be kind of that nice, kind of dark pale, if you will, to kind of a ruby color. Just a nice, gorgeous beer that's decently carbonated. Again, the head doesn't have to stick around forever. So what are we looking for in a good example of this style? In my opinion, you're looking for. This is also kind of shared with the BJCP. You are looking for clean malt character with enough bitterness to balance the sweetness that malt contributed, with a noticeable modern, new world hop aroma and flavor. And it's surprisingly drinkable for its strength. I'm with you, Steve. I'm not going to sit around and just chug American Strong Ale. But when one gets opened, if somebody's cracking open a commercial example or even a homebrewed example of a good American Strong Ale, I'm having more than just one glass of it. It's good enough to drink a couple of.
For sure. And, I've kind of go back to, equating it to a good barley wine or a good imperial stout. When you are in that mood to drink such a style like that, you definitely want to have a couple.
Yeah, that's me with most styles. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, some notable commercial examples, and the one I referred to earlier, I think the one that probably kind of most people's head goes to when they're thinking about this style is Stone Brewing's Arrogant Bastard. That is such a popular, such a popular beer when it first hit the market, and to this day, people still love it. I think they've even got their own website just for Arrogant Bastard.
Right.
But other commercial examples are Oscar Blues Goodnight, which I've had, and Port Brewing, another San Diego brewery, their Shark Attack Double Red, and that's what I mean. It's a double red IPA that the BJCP list is a classic example of American Strong Ale. Can you think of any other commercial examples? I
know Great Lakes has. I'm going to butcher the hell out of this name. Nosferatu. I don't think I've had, but I've had a fair share of Great Lakes beers, so I might have had it and just forgotten about it.
Hey, if you drink too much, that makes sense, right? If you drink too much American Strong Ale.
Or just old age.
Yeah, I'm there with you.
But yeah, I don't. After that, none really come to mind. I'm not too sure of even like local breweries around me are really brewing too many of these days.
You very rarely see it on tap these days. If you're going to a brewery,
it's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, but it also sort of makes sense. This isn't, in my opinion, one of those styles that you're like, oh man, I can't wait to hit the brewery on Friday night and just drink some American Strong Ale.
It's not going to sell.
Exactly. And so which is beautiful for the home brewer because it's a great style to have on tap if you've got more than one faucet, of course. Yes. Because it's just a nice one to go back to and enjoy, a couple, at night when you get home from work or whatever. And they really do. If you make them well, they really do taste good. Well, as I said earlier, I've never purposely brewed an American Strong Ale, but I've definitely had a bunch of commercial examples, including the 3 that we talked about a second ago. Well, I'm not the biggest fan of beer, of like big beers in general. I've got to say, I really do like a well-made American Strong Ale. They can be oddly refreshing for how strong they are, and there's something about that I enjoy, even if I can't drink more than 1 or 2 in a setting. But how would a batch brewed using a bunch of corner-cutting methods turn out? That's exactly what we're going to be talking about when we're back from this break. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. Chilling wort can be a chore, especially after a long brew day, but not with the Exchillerator Counterflow Chiller, which can chill a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch of wort in 5 minutes or less, leading to a strong cold break and clear wort in the fermenter. Brewlosophy's Matt Del Fiacco uses the Exchillerator Max and absolutely loves it. In addition to improved chilling efficiency, every Exchillerator comes with a 5-year warranty that covers the entire chiller for manufacturer defects. If you're looking to up your chilling game and a CFC is right for you, head over to Exchillerator.com today. At the time I started hanging out with other brewers where I live here in Fresno, Arrogant Bastard was an incredibly popular beer. We're about 4 or 5 hours north of San Diego where Arrogant Bastard was born. And it was just, everybody was drinking it. Every brewer that I knew loved it. It was just this crazy new thing. Now, I'm not sure if it was just because we're in California or if people around the world or US loved this beer as much as we did. But it was very rare for us to show up to like a beer share or pretty much anywhere, a barbecue, and not see Stone Brewing Arrogant Bastard. So that is where I first was introduced to this style of American Strong Ale. Well, contributor Mike Neville recently brewed an American Strong Ale using a variety of short and shoddy methods. For this one, he did a full volume 5-gallon batch. Now, when we talk about short and shoddy, I feel like I have to qualify this every once in a while. Our intention is not to make a bad beer. Our intention is to make the best beer possible while cutting corners. So there's certain things that we do, like water chemistry, that we know contributes a positive thing to beer. And so of course we're going to do that. Plus it's easy. So that is the short and shoddy approach. On this one, Mike did a full volume 5-gallon or 19-liter batch. He started brewing at 1:31 p.m. by collecting the full volume of filtered water that he adjusted to a balanced sulfate to chloride ratio. It was about 174 sulfate to 164 ppm chloride. That's right about what I would do. That probably resulted in a calcium level somewhere in the 150 to 200 ppm range, something like that. His grain bill, again, 68% Mecca grade La Manta pale malt, 10% Munich malt, 10% Mecca grade Venora Vienna style malt, and then 10% Mecca grade Opal 22. They call this their Graham and Cocoa malt, with 1% Crystal double roasted Crystal, which is Crystal DRC. I believe that's from Simpsons. What do you think of that? What do you think of that grain bill, Steve?
It's exactly what I would think of. I love the Munich. Adds a little bit more character. The pale malt, I think that one of the greatest secrets that I came upon when really kind of at my pinnacle of like entering competitions was that adding that pale malt to IPAs that really kind of differentiates your beer from other beers because it really stands out. So using that, I think is a no-brainer. And Vienna malt, I mean, I just can't say enough about it. So it's always on my list.
And that Mecca Vienna malt, in my experience at least, is a lot richer than your classic kind of big malt Vienna malt, like Environment or whatever. I love both, but this seems like a really nice base for an American Strong Ale.
For sure.
I don't know if the 1% Crystal DRC, I've never used that stuff, but I like that option over using a roasted malt so that it sounds to me like you would avoid that kind of harsh, black malt, roasted malt character while still getting nice color and a little bit of that darker crystal flavor. So,
yeah, but not that dark, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I don't even know what the SRM of Crystal DRC is.
I'm not really sure. I know I've had it at one point in time in my brewery, but yeah, I couldn't tell you offhand.
So when the water was to strike temperature, Mike added the grains to the water, stirred really well to incorporate it before checking to ensure he was at his target mash temperature of 154 degrees Fahrenheit or 68 degrees C. Again, kind of that sweet spot for beta and alpha amylase. He left the mash alone for a very brief 30 minutes, this guy, after which the grains were removed.
Cutting corners.
And then... Yeah, that's right. He's such a corner cutter. Slacker, right? And then the wort was boiled for just 30 minutes here. Now, and when you're doing a reduced boil, in order to get that bitterness where you need it for the style, you usually have to add more hops. You're not boiling for 60 minutes, so you're cutting your isomerization time down by half, basically. And so that usually means using a high alpha hop and more of it, at the start of your boil. So that's exactly what Mike did. He added 57 grams. That's about 2 ounces of Chinook at 30 minutes. That's right at the start of the boil. He then added 28 grams each of Chinook. That's 1 ounce. Chinook, Columbus Lupamax, and Sonnet hops at 5 minutes. So that's, this whole thing has 5 ounces of hops in it. And he was aiming again for that he wanted to get that nice bitterness to balance the malt sweetness. I think that is just a solid approach. Only 2 hop additions, but all American hops that are known to contribute that fruity kind of citrusy pine thing.
Yeah, it's a great combination, I think. I always try to discuss with either people who are coming over to drink my beer, or if I'm doing tastings at Workforce or anywhere else, Homebrew Club, trying to stress that difference that we do with the hop additions at the beginning of a short and shoddy, because you really need to make sure you have enough of the bitterness for the beer.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when the boil was finished, Mike quickly chilled his wort with the Jaded Brewing King Cobra immersion chiller, and then he took a refractometer reading that showed that it was at 1066 OG. So right there, kind of towards the lower end of the American Strong Ale OG range, but that is perfectly appropriate. Sort of typical. One of the things that we've noticed when we reduce our mash and boil length. One of the things that we've noticed when we reduce our mash and boil length in doing these short and shoddy batches is that our brew house efficiency does go down a little bit. And that there also seems to be a correlation between lower efficiency and higher strength. And so Mike got 53% brew house efficiency on this one. That may be about 10% lower than if he were to do this standard, 60-minute mash, 60-minute boil. Nothing huge. He still hit 1066 OG. So I think that's perfectly fine. And then into that wort, he pitched a single pouch of Imperial Yeast A18 Joystick. Now, I've never used Joystick. Steve, you have. What do you think about that yeast choice?
I like it. It was one of my suggestions earlier on. I think it contributes enough flavor to kind of join and marry with the hop additions. So I think it's a good choice. And
I think it's noted as being, at least these days, an American ale strain. I'm sure it has its source in England or something like that. But
sure,
it is my understanding is it's similar to, I think, Pac-Man by Y Yeast or something,
okay.
Which was, I forget exactly. I could be wrong on that, but it is noted to be a clean fermenting, well attenuating American yeast. So I think it's a perfect choice for something like this. And if it does leave behind some residual, esters and just kind of fermentation character, that works in a style like this.
It's not going to be off-putting.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. And it's not like he's using a Hefeweizen yeast or something.
Right.
Exactly. Yuck. That's like shoddy and shoddy, not necessarily just shoddies. So he started this batch at 1:31 p.m. By the time he pitched his yeast and connected his glycol to this to his fermenter, it was 3:29 for a total brew day time of 1 hour and 58 minutes. He just was under that 2 hour mark, which I think is pretty damn impressive.
Impressive.
If you got to get up early and knock a batch out before you got to drop your kids off at school or something, this is the way to do it. But only if the beer turns out well. So now Mike fermented this beer at 68 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees C. He does have a glycol unit connected to his fermentation vessel, so it does a really good job of maintaining that temperature. Chances are, at the very center of that wort during fermentation, it may have gotten up to about 70 F or 21 C. Nothing to worry about, right? After 10 days of fermentation, he noticed no signs of fermentation at all, or activity was absent at this point. So he took a hydrometer measurement, showing that the beer was at 1014 FG. 1066 to 1014. That results in an ABV of about 6.8%. Again, this is sort of pushing that higher end of the American IPA, lower end of double IPA, but it's got this malt character that takes it out of style for both of those, making it a little bit darker and pushing it into that American strong ale category, in my opinion. Maybe it is a little bit on the low end of the strong piece of this, but that's okay. He then cold crashed the beer to 38 degrees Fahrenheit or 3 degrees Celsius under pressure overnight, and then pressure transferred that beer into a CO2 purge keg. He did not use any finings. He didn't filter it. He was just relying on joystick yeast to drop out and this beer to clear up. He did burst carbonate the beer in the keg overnight before he reduced the gas to serving pressure, which he said was 14 psi. And then after just a week of conditioning, he started serving it to tasters for evaluation. What do you think of the way this beer looks? The picture, at least, that we've got on the website. What do you think of the way it looks, Steve?
Like, I want to drink it. Yeah, it looks good. I love it.
It's really pretty. That's the thing about this style. And when you start to get into those kind of darker crystals, it creates this color that is I just love it. That it's kind of like a bloody red, copperish color. Now Mike's, obviously this is the short and shoddy batch. He was serving it just a week after conditioning. I'm sure that 3 weeks later it was more clear. There was light haze in the one when he was serving it to tasters. It was certainly not murky. You could sort of see through the edges. It did have a nice light tan head with this beautiful kind of dark copper color. But again, I would want this beer to clear up. I would have probably used gelatin fining if it was me brewing it, even short and shoddy, just because it hastens that clearing, the clarity process. But overall, this beer looked really nice.
Yeah. Definitely. I would definitely drink it and ask for more.
Yeah. Well, who knows? What if it tasted like crap? We don't know. We're gonna get to that. Now, Mike, when he was tasting this beer, he said that he felt it had that it has a strong but balanced malt and hop character that stood out due to the clean fermentation. He said that the malt was like a blend of bready, toasty, and caramel malt flavors with nice piney and citrus hops to balance that out. It had a full body with medium carbonation, and he noted no off flavors. To me, that description that Mike gave of this beer that he brewed is pretty solid. It sounds to me like an American strong ale.
Definitely. And I like the note of the no off flavors.
That's key, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, great. No off flavors. It tastes like trash, but there's no off flavors in it. So he served this beer to 19 blind tasters. When we say blind, that just means they know the style. They don't know how it was brewed. And so the participants are not only informed of the style, but they're also given the BJCP style description, which we read earlier in the episode. Now, then they're asked to rate the beer on just various aspects. And so the first thing we look at is what we call the average characteristic rating. We just ask the tasters how hoppy, malty, and dry the beer is, and we ask them to rank it on a Likert scale. Now, on this particular American Strong Ale, tasters rated the strongest characteristic as being its maltiness, which yielded an average of about 3.6 out of 5, and then hoppiness was a close second at 3.2 out of 5, while the dryness was the lowest rated at 2.9 out of 5. That all fits with what I would expect for an American Strong Ale.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Without a doubt.
Yeah, kind of driven by the malt character with that supportive hop and just a nice dry yeast that gets out of the way. But you've got so much malt in there that it's not watery in your mouth. It's not washing off your palate. My hunch is that when people sipped this beer, that flavor kind of stuck around for a little bit, which is can be really enjoyable. Definitely, in my opinion. Yeah,
definitely.
All right, and then in terms of breaking down what hop, malt, and yeast characteristics people actually perceived, tasters, 10 out of 19 of the tasters felt that the hop character was most notable was the pine and resinous thing. 2 each said earthy, floral, and berry, and then 1 person each said fruity, spicy, and melon. I mean, that's all over the board. 10 out of 19 people saying pine resinous, given the hops that were used, that probably makes the most sense to me. Nobody endorsed dank, caddy, or onion garlic, which good for you, Mike. Those to me are going out of style in this day and age. But I don't know. That sounds pretty good to me, those hop characteristics.
Yeah, I think what the piney and resinous characteristic is definitely right on, considering the hops that he used. Yeah, and
you consider the fruitiness that comes from classic C hops. It really is more like grapefruit rind. That's been my experience. You're not really getting that tropical fruit, stone fruit thing. So it makes sense that people kind of notice that piney thing over any fruity characteristics, especially when melded with that rich malt character. That pine can kind of cut through that, and I think that works really well. Now, in terms of the malt character, 8 out of 19 people thought it was toasty. 6 rated caramel sweet, 4 rated it as roasty, and then 1 person rated cracker bread crust as being the most prominent malt character. Nobody endorsed nutty or chocolate. It's interesting to me that 4 people rated it as roasty, given that malt bill. Unless DRC has more of a roast character than I'm imagining, I don't know where that would have come from. Maybe that Mecca grade opal malt.
Maybe it's just the perception of, this is a darker beer than, say, a light lager or a pale lager or a blonde ale. That you have to have some sort of dark roast in this. I'm assuming Mike, his tasters were from his homebrew club, so I'm sure that they had somewhat of a preconceived notion of what was added to it.
Sure.
Maybe that's where the 4 roasty contributors thought of. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that 8 out of 19, a plurality, felt it was toasty, and then another 6 caramel sweet, those two together make up a majority, and that makes a lot of sense to me. Again, the darker the beer, the more likely some of us are going to be, biased to view it as being a roasty, stout-like beer. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to, fermentation characteristics, this is one where I feel like there could be a lot more variation than the data panned out. 12 out of 19 people rated it as being clean. 5 people noted more of an ester fermentation character. 2 people put sulfur, and then nobody endorsed phenolics or wild. That makes sense. But those 5 people who rated esters, I always, whenever we're serving somebody beers that have a decent hop charge, I always, we describe esters as being kind of a fruity thing. And so I always wonder if they're, maybe the esters they're noting are just from the hops. But I would imagine in this beer, given how high, 1066 fermenting it with joystick, I would imagine there was actually probably a decent amount of esters. But no, 12 out of 19, clean.
Very interesting. I would think that I would have expected the clean to come through with this. So I'm not really surprised.
Yeah, well, and that aligns with the style description as well. We're looking for that clean American fermentation character so that the malt and the hops really are what shines. So very good job there. I mean, at the very least, no phenolics or wild characteristics. So we could say that chances are it wasn't contaminated, which is good.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, good thing. A little bit of sulfur. If those 2 people were accurate and there was kind of that eggy sulfur characteristic, it wouldn't surprise me given this beer was served a week after he kegged it and it was a 1066 OG beer. So again, not too surprising there. But my hunch is it probably was more of a clean fermentation characteristic, which again aligns with that style description. And only one person of the 19 who took this survey who evaluated this beer, only one person felt that they perceived an off flavor, and that off flavor that they thought they perceived was oxidation. I don't know. I would think that if that was there, a lot more people. I mean, these are homebrew club people who ostensibly know what oxidation tastes like, and only one person noted it. So I'm kind of wont to go with the majority on this one and assume that there likely wasn't an off flavor there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, as we've talked about ourselves and we've talked about extensively on this podcast, there's always one person in our homebrew clubs that will claim that every beer they taste is oxidized.
Or has diacetyl, or has DMS,
or has
the trigger off flavors. Yeah, diacetyl. My bad. That's right.
But no, I mean it's also people are maybe just more sensitive to it, and that's something that they perceive. And to them maybe it's there. To me maybe it's not. I don't know. It's just an interesting thing. Then especially more and more interesting when you start thinking about how the human mind works when they're given these kinds of surveys.
Yeah, one of the things I have kind of these ideas about every off flavor and things that people likely or potentially could confuse them for. When you consider oxidation, one of the things that we know about big beer. So you're taking American barley wine, wheat wine, imperial stout, anything that is high OG, is that they do seem to fare well with some age on them. Well, one of the things we know happens over time is oxidation. Not that it's a bad thing. It's the good kind of oxidation. It's that little bit of oxidation that creates aged flavor, that creates that characteristic. And I'm wondering if maybe the one taster who noted oxidized off flavor as being there maybe wasn't just kind of had that association, right? Of this is a bigger beer. It is an American strong ale. We told him that, right? It is an American strong ale. So maybe there was just kind of this expectation of oxidized characteristic, and we call it an off flavor, but who knows? Maybe this person ended up thinking it actually fit with the style, right? But that's one option.
And it also could be that the more knowledge you have, the more things that you could associate a certain taste with or a certain smell with, it almost becomes an enemy, and it's like, oh, well, I think I detect this. Well, maybe, but maybe it's not. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I'm more inclined to think Dunning-Kruger was an effect here, but who knows? We don't know what this person's experience was. So
exactly.
One of the questions that we ask on these short and shoddy surveys is how well does this beer represent the style based on the description that we've given, as well as your past experience with, notable examples of American strong ale. 3 out of 19 people rated it a 5 out of 5. So to those 3, they thought this was squarely an American strong ale. It fit the category beautifully. It, if you're going to submit it to a competition, submit it as an American strong ale. Another 9 So that equals 12 people altogether, but another 9 rated it a 4 out of 5, and 4 thought it was a 3 out of 5. Nobody rated it a 1 or a 0 or a 2 out of 5, which I think is pretty impressive. So everybody at least thought it was a 3 out of 5 on a scale of representativeness to the style as described by the BJCP.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I've tasted Mike's beers, not this beer in particular, but he's a good brewer. He knows what he's doing. So yeah, these numbers don't really surprise me in the slightest.
And I mean, before we talk about what I want to talk about, preference rating, that's a final question we ask. 5 out of 19 people liked this beer so much they gave it a 5 out of 5. Another 6 rated it a 4 out of 5. 4 people gave it a 3 out of 5. Another 4 people gave it a 2 out of 5. Nobody rated it a 1 or a 0 out of 5. Now, when thinking about preference, you have to remember that we're asking for subjective preference ratings, right? The representativeness of style was added. That question was added to kind of suspend what people think about the style in general. So, for example, I'm not a huge fan of Weiss beer. If I'm taking this survey, how well does it represent the style? I can rate that more objectively, I guess, as to, how does this compare to others versions of this style that I've had, what I know of this style to be. And then we go on to the preference question, and it's more about what did you think of this beer? Would you have another one? I might rate that one, a 2 out of 5 because I'm just not a fan of Weiss beer.
Right.
So keep that in mind. 5 out of 19 people rated this American Strong Ale that Mike made using short and shoddy methods. This thing was made in under 2 hours. A 5 out of 5. That's gnarly. I mean, that. And then another 6 gave it a 4 out of 5. That's 11 out of 19 people are giving it a 4 or 5 out of 5. I have to believe that this beer was pretty doggone good.
Yeah. I would chalk this up as a successful brew.
And here's the fun part. Under 2 hours brewed. He cut all these corners. He only mashed for 30 minutes. He only got 53% efficiency. So he had to use a whole pound more malt. He only boiled it for 30 minutes. So where's all that diacetyl that's supposed to be there? Where's all that DMS that's supposed to be there? He served it a week after he kegged it. These are a lot of things that go against the norm of brewing, this kind of accepted brewing wisdom. And this beer turned out, based on the data, turned out pretty doggone good. And I think that, again, this just serves to show that sometimes if you need to cut some things out of your brew day, if time is more important to you than what some people say, the enjoyment of sitting around, on a brew day and sipping beer while you're making another beer, if that time matters, then, this is not an unviable approach to brewing beer, which, as we've shown over and over, and the fact that you can get away with making a higher strength American Strong Ale, yes, you might have to make some adjustments to your recipe. You might have to make some adjustments to other aspects, of your brewing process, but it's not necessarily going to guarantee you a bad beer. And I love that.
It's always something that I keep in mind when I plan out my brew days, and if it's definitely an option, you can't go wrong.
And what I like is I'm seeing a lot of people who are integrating aspects of this. I mean, short and shoddy, the idea is to kind of go, all out. Again, not doing anything that we know is going to... I had somebody say, well, why aren't you just fermenting in dirty fermenters? That's short and shoddy. Well, it's also stupid. That's why we're not doing it. We're not doing stupid,
right.
And shoddy. We're trying to see what we can get away with. And what the evidence has kind of stacked up to show us is that you can get away with cutting a lot of corners that people, used to believe you couldn't cut. So killer job to Mike on that one, and we appreciate all the tasters who participated in this one. Now, we did get one reader comment that I wanted to address in this one because I think it kind of gets to the more brewlosophy side, the philosophy side of brewlosophy here. Richard said, it seems like it would have been better not to tell the tasters anything about the beer. Too much information gives them an expectation of what to expect. No information would give you an honest opinion of the brew. So what Richard is saying here, Steve, is don't tell them the style. Don't give them the style description. Just let them rate it all willy-nilly, not knowing what it was at all. I think that's what Richard is saying. What are your thoughts on that? Because I've got some strong ones. And in fact, the way the survey is today and the reason we do the short and shoddy survey the way that we do stemmed from this question way long ago.
I actually kind of agree with Richard here. And I kind of think it goes back to what I was saying before about your mind being your own worst enemy, that you have these preconceived notions that, well, I know an American Strong Ale has this, so this is what it should be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you have the knowledge that, and you have the confidence in the brewer, which I'm sure the homebrewers in Mike's club do, because Mike's a good brewer, they know that he knows his stuff, so they're gonna perceive things the way they should be. I don't know. I can go back and forth with it. I really can. I don't have a strong conviction that we shouldn't tell tasters that what the style is. But I'm interested in hearing what you have to say.
Well, I'll tell you, when we first started the Short and Shoddy series, the first 1 or 2 Short and Shoddy batches, we didn't even do a survey. And then eventually I was like, well, I want to get some data on this. I want to see what people actually think. And those first probably like 5 to 10 Short and Shoddy surveys, we didn't tell people what the style was. Rather, we asked them to guess what it was. So we listed all of the BJCP styles and allowed them to pick the one they thought it was.
I remember that.
And and the problem is, beers have so much carryover. There's so many similarities between different styles that the styles that people were guessing were all over the board. There was so little accuracy, right?
Yeah.
That it just seemed moot. It seemed pointless. And so I actually talked with some people who are in sensory evaluation about how they would approach this. And they were like, why aren't you telling people you want them for this particular series? What you want them to do is rate it on what they know about a style. And that made the most sense to me at the time. And ever since integrating that piece into it, I do feel like the data is stronger. I get what Richard is saying. I absolutely think there's room for that, for people to kind of guess what the style is and then also, rate the beer without knowing what your intention was. But I feel for this series, and I don't mean to say this to like justify our decision. I truly think it was like, the pick the one that you think is the most appropriate, even though both options are solid. I'm not down dissing what Richard is saying. I just think for this series, having people evaluate a beer based on a specific style and them knowing at least what the style is, I think it gives us a little bit more meaningful data in the end. I could be wrong on that. But if you go back and you look at those first few Short and Shoddy surveys, there's a lot of like, nobody knows what the style is. And it could be something as simple as like an American IPA. And you're still going to have all over the board, people thinking it's a pale ale, people thinking it's a session IPA or whatever, so I think rating it against a style works.
I think that if comparing the two options, yes, what we're doing right now is vastly an improvement over not saying anything, knowing the outcome was kind of a moot point anyway. However, if there are other options, I'd be interested in hearing those.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, we absolutely take the feedback from the people who read our stuff, listen to our show, watch our YouTube stuff. We take it very seriously. We talk about it. And so we appreciate your feedback there, Richard. And again, if you want us to address something in a future episode, leave comments on the website. We read through those things and we try to respond to them at least. Sometimes they get, they go through the filter, I suppose. But that is about everything that we've got for American Strong Ale. Is there anything you'd like to add before you wrap up, Steve?
Well, I mean, if you're pressed for time, you have a lot of responsibilities outside of brewing, and you want a solid beer on tap or in bottles, give Short and Shoddy a try. I think it's definitely something that can help out your day a little bit and still deliver some good beer.
Yeah, and honestly, if you were like I was when I first started messing around with this and you're really skeptical that it can produce a good beer, do it anyways. Serve it to your friends. Don't tell them how it was brewed and see what they think. Because oftentimes we're our own worst critic. And so we are going to taste the off flavors. In my opinion, it's a lot of fun. The beauty of homebrewing is we can experiment without a huge ding to our bottom line, and chances are you're going to end up at least with a beer that you enjoy drinking. So, well, remember to subscribe to the Brew Lab podcast where host Cade Job takes you into the lab with brewing experts so you're notified when new episodes drop. And don't forget, you can click the link in the description of this episode to read all about this Short and Shoddy American Strong Ale. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.